Okay, in this video I'm going to talk about percents, ratio, and proportion. Okay? Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the whole notion that a ratio is a comparison. And sometimes you'll see things like a comparison of 2 to 3, 2 to 3, 2 to 3. All three of these things say exactly the same thing. Now, when we look at a proportion is two equivalent ratios. For example, 1/2 is the same thing as 2/4 because if I divide both of these by the same number, I get this. Likewise, if I multiply both of these by the same number, I get this. Okay? So I can multiply the smaller numbers. I can divide the larger numbers. And always by the same number. In other words, 2 over 2, 3 over 3, 4 over 4. So a proportion is equivalent ratios. Now, when I look at a proportion, I have the following things. Okay? The E's represent extremes. The M's represent mean. So sometimes you'll see the geometric mean. So that means that these two things here represent the mean. Now the other thing, if you have trouble remembering which is which, just remember, if you draw a backwards N, it starts here, it ends here. Where it starts and ends is where the extremes are. Okay? Now, with a ratio, with two ratios, the product of the means equals the product of the extremes. So whatever number in those locations, I can solve and get an answer. So, for example, if I were solving something like 2/3 equals x over 8. Okay? Now, I couldn't multiply this real readily by something to get 8. In other words, 3 times 3 is 9, 3 times 2 is 6, so it's not a nice, neat number. So, I can solve it by doing the product of the means equal the product of the extremes. So, the product of the means is 3x. The product of the extremes is 2 times 8, or 16. Now, lots of times you'll hear the term cross multiply. That's what this means. Multiply this, multiply that. Now, to solve then, I just solve like a regular algebraic equation, and x would be equal to 5 1/3. Or I could simply leave it as 16/3. It's an improper fraction, but it is in lowest terms. Okay? Now, let's say we have a problem that says, I have a ratio of boys to girls of 3 to 4. Alright, so if I'm going to do a ratio and I'm going to solve a proportion, I have to make my proportion look the same all the way across. Now, I'm going to choose to do boys to girls this way. I could put girls on top, boys on the bottom. It doesn't matter. But whatever I do, all the way across my proportion, in other words, it's going to look something like this. My numbers that are on the top are going to equate to numbers of boys. Numbers on the bottom are going to equate to numbers of girls. Alright, so boys to girls in order is 3 to 4. So I have 3 boys for every 4 girls. Now it says how many boys, so that's what I don't know. So I'm going to put my X there for 120 girls. So to solve my proportion, I cross multiply. The product of the means is 4x. The product of the extremes is 120 times 3, which is 360. Then I divide by 4. and X is 90. So, that tells me that I have 90 boys for 120 girls. And if I have the right answer, okay, I should be able to reduce this and get this same number that I started out with. And when you get numbers that are nice and neat and not fractional, it's real easy to do that.